All right. Hello, venue owners. Welcome to the third episode of the Venue Insights podcast. I'm here with Jonathan Aymin. Jonathan runs a venue management company called Common Sense Events in the Venue RX podcast, which is one of the leading podcasts in the venue industry. So if you're a venue owner, I would highly recommend checking out the podcast. Jonathan, you have incredible guests on there consistently, and there's a lot to learn in each episode. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate those kind words about the Venue RX. I'm really excited that you're doing this, to be honest. Like, I think, the industry needs more education, more resources. We definitely, don't have enough. There are not enough voices in this space, I believe. So really, really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So first, I'd love to get into your personal origin story in the industry. So how did you wind up getting into the wedding industry? And can you give us a brief history on your business?
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, back in like 2012, 2011, I was working a bunch of different serving jobs and doing serving, bartending, things like that. And my first thought was like, how can I expand, the amount of people that I can serve? Because I realized, I'm not gonna make the amount of money that I need to make serving, a section of tables, and my time was kind of limited in terms of what I was able to do, and in terms of what I was able to like top out at working in restaurants. And so I started a staffing company with my wife, and at that point, we had just had a baby, we had just got married, we were in college, so we had this staffing company, and we grew that. Over the next 3 to 4 years, we had almost 1,000 team members. We worked pretty much in all Southern California. So, Riverside County, LA, Palm Springs, quite a bit. But we were in Southern California, really a bespoke staffing company. So a little bit different than maybe, kind of your really large staffing companies, definitely very custom, high touch customer service. And we worked with a lot of venues. We also worked with catering companies and planners. And when we worked with venues, naively, I'll say, we were like, gosh, these guys have it so easy. You look at the venue manager and they just kind of just go sit in the office and, put their feet up for 6 or 8 hours and yell at us, when we're doing our load in or our load out, make us fill out these checklists and things like that. And we're like, man, that's probably a great job. We should, we want to get into that. And that was kind of the first thing. And, I'm being humorous, obviously, because we found out it's very much not the case. With managing venues, but we started managing one venue in 2018 and started growing that side of the business in 2018. And then COVID came, of course, and really made us evaluate our priorities. And we realized to be able to get to the next place with the business, with our staffing company, we would really need to have some volume, and bringing on more people at that point meant going in a more technologically driven route. And the byproduct of that was the people end up being numbers, really. And there's no way to make like a huge amount of money, like a really large amount of money, or make a huge impact without increasing the amount of staff that you have and really going large scale. And so it was kind of like, do we build this back after COVID? Do we build this back better, stronger, bigger, all of that, or do we pivot? And at that point, we were liking what we were doing with the venue management. We wanted to really lean into that. So we actually were acquired. The guts, I guess, of the business were acquired by a competitor who does a fantastic job. They do have a tech platform. And so that was acquired, and we really focused on venue management. And at that point going forward, so we brought on new clients, we kept growing, and with every step, with every venue that we've added on, we've learned something a little bit new. And our strategy right now, it's definitely evolved, but one of our big things is we really want to understand what it means to successfully and professionally manage a venue across the board, across the entire United States. We want to know what are the key ingredients and elements to success. And so that's where we have Common Sense Events, which is almost like the kitchen, if you will, where we actually get to be practitioners. We get to be in the field. We get to be dealing with the problems and issues and the staffing things and the vendor relationships and the setup and teardown and everything, all of the nitty gritty stuff across the entire country, from Connecticut to San Diego is our scope right now. And we get to really learn what it takes to be successful. And then we get to share that on the Venue RX. Of course, that's free education on YouTube and podcast platforms. Then WEVA, which is something, Wedding and Event Venue Association, which is something we launched late 2023. That is a professional trade association that, again, we hope to unify the industry and create some best practices and, again, kind of help push our industry forward. So we've got a three-prong approach that we're tackling, helping the industry level up. And that's it in a nutshell. I could go obviously much further, but don't want to drone on and on.
So you mentioned that there are some commonalities between with venues across the U.S. What are some of those commonalities that you see repeating themselves over and over?
So we look at it in terms of framework. So obviously, kind of just taking a step way back, you have to have a staffing plan. You have to have a person who is going to be responsible for the different departments. And a lot of times when we look at owner-operated venues or smaller operations, when I say smaller, I don't necessarily mean like size. It could be a huge, 1,000-acre ranch, but it could be operated by just a couple of people. At the same time, it's really important to realize that those few people do wear all of the hats. They are the CMO. They are the content strategist. They're wearing all of the hats that there are in a much larger organization. But maybe the breadth and the volume and the depth of those roles aren't fully expressed at the size of the venue that's there. But it's important to bring that up, and it's important to realize that that honoring that structure is super important. You can't really escape from it, and you incur management debt, almost not financial debt from hiring a role and taking on some debt, but you have some management debt in the fact that you as the owner operator are wearing all these hats. So that's one commonality we see across the board. People frequently don't realize what it takes to manage a venue, and we see that people don't realize what it takes, and then they get in and they slowly start realizing more and more. So if I could shout something to the rooftops, it's that, this is not an easy industry to be in, but you do have to have a framework. You have to have an HR framework, a financial framework, an operations framework, a marketing framework, just to start off. And every single venue has those, regardless if you are 200-300 acre equestrian farm, if you're a smaller 5-acre space, if you're an urban venue, like regardless of where you're at, you do have to have frameworks around those key pillars of the business.
And to go off on that a little bit, what do you think people overlook the most when they're getting into the venue industry? Like, what are some things that, might not seem like that big of a deal when you're starting your venue, but that actually turn out to be, quite a big deal once you're up and running?
Totally. The most boring and annoying things, finance and permits. Like, realistically, I mean, so many venues, and it's one of the problems in our industry right now. So many venues don't have the right permitting, and they don't have the right financial analysis. And honestly, it's something that we've struggled with over the years, really coming up with a solid way to financially view the venue and revenue coming in. Are we going to look at it on a cash basis or accrual basis? What does a realistic pro forma look like? Obviously a P&L, but making sure that you're looking at a balance sheet, statement of cash flows. These things are super kind of annoying, boring stuff to do for someone who's creative, right? Someone who wants to connect with people and who's highly relational. But it's something that's so important specifically for venues inside the wedding industry. So yeah, I would 100% say, the finance side, really locking that in, not being under leveraged, because this is an extremely capital intense business. And that, I think, is one of the key differentiators from the venue subcategory in the wedding and events industry versus pretty much any other one. Maybe with the exception of catering, but still with catering, you can start, and there's a lower barrier to entry there than going out and getting a space, signing a lease, or buying a space, the rehab, any tenant improvements or negotiating that, all the permits. Permitting and county regulations and city regulations are definitely catching up with some of the creative ways people have been doing venues. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things, just that finance and permitting side.
So when you were starting out with Common Sense Events, what were some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that you faced when starting? And excuse me, and how did you overcome those?
Oh man. I think the biggest challenge is not having the right people. And and you can't when you're starting out, you don't really have the resources unless when you're bootstrapping it. If you come in and you have um, you've kind of appropriately allocated startup costs. Just from where we were starting, we didn't have anything. We bootstrapped everything. It was my wife and I, and so as we built the company, I think not having a correct assessment of financially what was necessary, and then kind of just not having the right people to be able to do the roles, meant that we did it. We would get stuck in roles doing things that maybe we shouldn't have been doing, or we kept those roles for longer than we should have. And then the other part is not having systems, and that's really hard to say because we didn't know what we didn't know, and there's no place to learn this for the venue industry, and that's one of the things that we're combating. But just not having SOPs, again, something that's kind of boring, but not having SOPs around tasks was a huge hurdle, and something that once we started doing that, once we started tracking metrics, once we started having some standard operating procedures around business functions, our business started to grow vertically, not just horizontally. And you hit capacity when you just start to do as much as you can. And so that was really, really important. I also think, I now, like, if I could tell my younger self something in business starting out, I would definitely say, write down what you're doing. What is successful? What are you doing that's working? Write that down and be prepared to hand that off as quickly as possible. Find a different role owner. And a lot of this depends on what your goals are in business. So I think that's important to decide first. But if you're trying to grow and not be in sales at the venue, not be in venue management at the venue, not be the chef if you're doing catering, not be a DJ, but you want to manage people and you kind of want to run an organization, which was my goal. To do that, you need to figure out what your magic sauce is, what you're doing that is working for sales or venue management, write it down, and then do it with someone else. Bring someone else with you along that.
So figure out exactly what your actual goals are. And then while you're heading towards those goals on your own, just write down all of the SOPs, all of the little things that you have to do in order to reach those goals, and then hand those off to someone else.
Yeah, 100%. And now it's easier than ever. Obviously AI has significantly changed things like how we create SOPs. There's tools like Scribe, and there's a Fathom note taker and Otter and all these different things, and a Loom, of course. And that's so important because everything that you do inside a business can be broken down into an SOP, and you can say, hey, I first fill out this thing, and then I do this, and then I ask for this information, and you can have that listed out, and you can just do it using AI, and then AI can transcribe it, and then you can have it written down. You don't actually have to take notes anymore, which is great.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the biggest pain points that you see venue owners struggling with the most? And how does your company, Common Sense Events, how do you guys help ease those pain points with venue owners?
There's a number of things. So I'll start out by saying that. But I think the biggest one that just jumps out at me right now is being held hostage to old systems and processes and old ways of doing things because the owner is tied to a individual who does things their way. And they are gatekeeping. That individual is gatekeeping the information. They are siloing, they're black boxing information. And you get, you're working with someone who maybe has a high level of control, like their personality has a high level of control. And that's what makes them successful, right? Like, you want someone who really wants to be in control, who's going to remember all the details and things like that. But, they've, written everything down on a piece of paper, and it's their piece of paper, or it's their phone, or it's their cell phone number, and all the communication is going through them. And so there's no SOPs. There's nothing to hold them accountable to. There's no standard operating procedure. It's just like, give it to Sally. Sally can do it. And so not having the proper, the proper structures and systems in place allows you to just kind of work with a high performing team member that has all of the information siloed. Then the venue owner is really tied to that person. You can't piss that person off. you better give them the raise when they want it. If that person leaves, you're totally screwed. Like, held hostage is a very good way to describe it.
Yeah.
So we solve that by, we SOP everything. We're setting this company up so that if I get hit by a bus, or if any one of our team members gets hit by a bus, someone can step in and fill in my role and everyone's role in the company. And we do that for freedom. We do that because we want to work with very talented people, but we want people to be able to take a day or a week off. And we also want, if the team member in question decides to pursue a different opportunity, or something changes in their life and things aren't working out the way that they were working before, we need to have that mobility to be able to say, hey, you're not achieving the metrics that we were hoping for this role, and we need to have that happen. Let's put you on a performance plan or whatever. And then we need to be able to hire someone new in the space. And so we do that, and we have a great HR team as well. And we do work with people for a long time. I don't want it to sound cutthroat or anything like that. We do have great relationships with people over the long term, but there is a standard, and I'm held to that standard just like everyone else is. So that's a problem, and also a way that we bring a solution to the table.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I feel like every venue has that person working in their business. They have that person that they hand off all of the little tasks. But nothing's written down, like you said. There are no clear-cut SOPs. It's just exactly what you said. Hand it over to Sally, and she'll take care of it. So I feel like if you can figure out how to write down those SOPs and make it repeatable, that's going to give you so much freedom within the business.
Totally. And a practical tip there, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to Sally and I'm going to tell her to write it down and she's going to give me pushback. A key element here is just finding, like, maybe even it's the owner that's just saying, hey, I'm curious, like, what is making you successful? Like, we want to grow this operation. We want to get to the place where we're able to give you a raise. We're able to bring in more clients. We're able to, there's a goal state. And kind of with that vision standpoint in mind, say, hey, this is where we'd like to get to. The way to get there is to understand what's the magic sauce, and writing it down, putting a note taker in meetings, tracking calls. Like, we use a virtual phone system called Dialpad, where all of the calls, there's a recording. And it's great. At first, people are like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, why? But then when we have a client that comes through and says, you told me that I could have early access at 8 a.m. Well, we can go back and look in the call and no, our team member didn't say that, but we're happy to do that, but that wasn't the case. Or unfortunately, we can't do that. So it allows us to really have objective standards and keep our team, and then also keep our clients accountable to a higher standard. So there's really, this is really, really, really important stuff. And I hope that more venue owners start doing it and just kind of make it standard practice in the industry. So
the power really lies in the SOPs.
Yeah, it really, really, really does. And it doesn't need to be overly complex. And also not spending a lot of time on the SOP. Like, if you're spending hours creating an SOP, it's already changed. SOPs should be, living, breathing documents that inform how you're doing what you're doing today, but they need to be looked at every once in a while to say, hey, we do things a little differently now. And it's not like a set it and forget it sort of thing.
Right. That makes sense. So maybe besides SOPs, what are some skills, maybe some soft skills that venue owners should focus on developing that you think will really help them the most in their business?
I think a hard interior and a squishy exterior, and that is not very psychological or sociological or anything like that, but basically having a really solid core, and that core is comprised of your values, your non-negotiables as an owner, as a business owner, the values that you stand for, what you're passionate about, the direction that you hope the business is going and you're pushing the business towards. So that kind of like interior, that core needs to be really, really strong, and you need to be unapologetic about that core. But then that external side, the way that you interact with clients, with vendors, with employees, it does need to be giving, and forgiving, and having empathy, I think, is really important. And being willing to be wrong and being willing for someone else to come in to your business and give them the space to grow and release control. That is one of the most difficult things that I see high level entrepreneurs and fire starters really struggle with, because you're good. You've started this business for a reason. Like, you're good at whatever the thing is. And so releasing it to someone who is maybe not going to do it as well as you at the beginning, and chances are is not going to ever do it as good as you, but they will do it at an 80% level. And if they're doing it at 80% level, then you get your time back to focus on other key elements of the business. I would say, empathy, having humility and self-awareness to understand where you're really good at, being willing to be wrong and admit that. And I think through some of these things, you create a healthy work culture, and everyone knows that's important. I would definitely say, empathy, self-awareness, but, deciding what things internally, that core, are non-negotiables, and then externally what things you're willing to be flexible on is extremely important.
So what would be some advice for a new venue owner who wants to grow their team? How do they grow without maybe overhiring, and what roles should be prioritized as the first hires?
This is a great question and going to be different for everyone. It comes down to what you're good at. So whoever you are listening to this, watching this, if you are extremely good at sales, keep sales. Don't let that one go right away. If you're super good at finance, don't let that one go. Don't make that the first hire. You want to find your first hire based on where you're deficient and where, you need to be spending less time, where you're probably going to find someone who's better than you. And so for us, it's like, I don't love the finance side of things. I'm not a details guy. So I'm going to surround myself with people who are details, who are going to watch the budget, who are operational in nature. And so that's where I would start. So just do a self audit and figure out, hey, what type of person am I, and who do I need in my corner to be able to be successful? After that, and just not over hiring, a budget, like setting a budget, is really important, but also looking at it from the standpoint of, if you are, let's say, whether you're raising money, whether you're getting a loan, whatever, giving yourself a bit of a runway to say, the first few people that we hire, they may not go with us forever, but they're going to occupy really key functions of the business. And so you have to have someone who's going to bring sales in the door. You've got to have a lead management system, whether it's you, whether it's someone else, a team, a system, whatever. You've got to have that lead management. You've got to have marketing. You've got to have someone to actually sell and convert the business into dollars in the bank. And then you have to have someone who is going to keep the promises, promise makers and promise keepers. Got to have someone who's going to keep the promises of the sales team and the marketing. And so figure out which piece, look at that as almost a pie, figure out what wedge of the pie you take, and then hire for some of those elements. And if you're more of a front person, hire ops. If you're more of an ops person, then hire a front person.
And so do you have any tips for once someone comes on board, once you hire someone new, do you have any effective training tips to really help that person get up to speed?
I'm gonna give you an answer, and it's gonna sound maybe like we have it figured out or something. We don't. And I even the best business person has so much to learn, right? So I want to say that as a caveat first. Second, really, again, this is where I keep saying SOPs.
Yeah.
This is where those are important. And we're right now completely revamping the onboarding system. But where we started was pretty terrible. We would just bring someone in and kind of they would just drink from a fire hose. They would just work with me, and it was kind of figure it out. And that's a terrible way to do it. And that was the feedback that we got. It was this was a horrible onboarding experience. And so slowly we've started to peel some of those layers back. So, we're using tools like Trainual, which is a training tool that basically we document, the steps, and then we say, okay, first, second, third, here's what you're going to do. One of the things that has been consistent feedback, and I just want to pass that along to everyone, is giving the new team member a idea of the timeline of what it looks like from the time they get hired to where they should be kind of off and running. And this is important because it gives them some perspective on the hiring process, the onboarding process, and where they are in it. And it's something that without that, it kind of is like training, on-site training, this, all this stuff's kind of coming at them, and they don't really understand where they are, like where the tracking is. This is something large companies do really well, but obviously most of us are not large companies. So, having a onboarding system, and this can be done very simply now with pulling up ChatGPT or your favorite AI tool and saying, and just talking to it, like hit that little microphone button, talk to it, say, hey, I need an onboarding structure. This is what we do first, second, third, like describe it. And then it'll spit you out an onboarding itinerary, and then share that with the new person so that they know where they're at.
Do you use Loom at all in that onboarding process?
Yes, we use Loom religiously. We actually use Loom as part of Trainual. So you don't have to use Trainual. Trainual just makes the onboarding process a little prettier and more trackable. But there's so many different tools. And if you wanted to go really, really simple, like a Google Doc that lays out, a Google Doc with tabs, essentially, that just lays out everything, and then a Loom embed directly in there with videos on how to do stuff is probably the most straightforward and cost-effective way to do onboarding.
I try to tell every single person that I know to use Loom. It is so effective because there's just no better way to like figure out how something is done than to just watch how it's done click by click.
100%. And you can comment on it. You can reference. I mean, yeah, there's so many. Loom is an incredible tool. The other thing I wanted to just mention really quick, taking communication away from your cell phone specifically as soon as possible will help you. Like, and so like if it's your cell phone number that's on the lead form,
Okay,
you're not going to be able to track how many calls you're getting in. You're going to have an idea, like you'll say, oh, I'm super busy, my phone's always ringing, but like how much are spam? Like you don't really know. And then part of it also is if you ever need to hand off communication for your team, you can't hand it off because you can't hand off your cell phone. So using tools like Slack is paid, but there's WhatsApp. There are free Slack accounts as well, but using WhatsApp, using Slack, using internal communication tools allows multiple people to be added and removed, and allows kind of a single stream of thought around an event, around a project. That's a key tool that we use quite a bit.
right. Yeah, if you're using your phone, like your personal phone, you're kind of just basing business decisions like based on vibes, pretty much.
Yes, 100%. And vibes, it's hit or miss. Are the vibes going to make money or not? We don't know.
Yeah, 100%. So, what do you see some common pitfalls or traps that you see venue owners just consistently falling into time and time again? And how do they avoid these?
Pitfalls, I would say doing not letting control go. And the reason that people don't let control go is because they haven't clearly defined the outcome, like what you expect the outcome to be. And so you're afraid to release control because, it's a little bit nebulous. Like, I'll just use a personal story. When we were first hiring on salespeople, I just said, just go be yourself. Kind of get out there and just be yourself, because that's what I did. I just went out there, and I'm not really like a salesperson. I'm not selling anyone. I'm not trying to convince anyone of everything. I just kind of take them through the venue, and it makes sense to me that I'm going to ask them a ton of questions, them being the client. I'm going to ask them a ton of questions about who they are and what they like and what they're looking for so that I can help them make the best decision. But that's me. That's intrinsic to me. I didn't write that down anywhere. And so the next person did it completely differently, and just them look different. So a common pitfall is just kind of assuming that people know everything that you do, and making those assumptions really end up hurting your relationship with that person. And again, there's nothing to keep them accountable to. So again, coming back to SOPs, writing that down, talking your process, recording your process on Loom, and then saying, hey, this is what it is. And then you can step away. and you can give the system to someone and say, here's the system, you run with it, and then you can give that up. So definitely common pitfall, not being willing to give up control, not being willing to step away, thinking that, I need to do it. I think another area is underestimating how expensive things are going to be and overestimating the amount of revenue that you're going to bring in and the synergy from different pieces of the business. So, for example, hey, I'm going to start. In fact, I just had a person, they don't own a venue yet, but they reached out on Instagram and they said, hey, I want to start a venue. My idea is to bring in a photo booth. I'm going to, do a bar service. We're not going to get our liquor license, but we're just going to have bartenders for them. We're going to do some florals. We're going to do some other things, and we're going to put it together as a package. Florals is a different business. Photo booth is a different business. A bar service is a different business. You have these different businesses, and assuming that you're going to be able to pull all of those off in addition to running a really good venue is a pretty wild assumption. Assuming that you're going to get the synergy of all those businesses all together, and then each one of them are going to be a revenue stream, and then using those imaginary revenue streams to, put on your pro forma is a really dangerous place to be. So I would say that's another key place that venue owners struggle.
And out of all the different venues that you work with, what would you say the average profit margin is for the average venue? I know it's going to differ depending on the type of business model they're running, but just as a whole, what would you say the average is, and what would you say is the sweet spot?
Yeah, this is a wild question. Just because there's no benchmarks right now. Like, so let's take the real estate industry, for example. There are benchmarks. Like if we're investing in commercial real estate today, we can look at cap rates, we can look at NOI, we can look at some of these kind of solid, defined terms that represent profitability. They represent, a return on our investment. And those really don't exist in the venue industry because of the wide range of styles of venue. So I will give you a real answer, I promise. But it is just all that to say it is different. And it's one of the things that we're working on inside WEVA. And I'm actually writing a book that is going to have a couple of these pieces, like how to come up with your own. And ultimately, I hope to standardize classes, just like there's a Class A apartment, Class B apartment, commercial has the same sort of system, all on the real estate side. So that's one of the things kind of long-term we're working on. But we are running about a 30% profit margin right now, on average. And that's not exact. I'm probably within 10% though. So, pretty close. And these are across the venues that we manage. Our system works a little bit differently. People pay us for the management layer of the business. We go in, we hire all the team members, we've got all the marketing, we've got everything it takes to run the venue. We operate your whole P&L. So as part of your P&L, there's a CSE management line, and that's a monthly fee, almost like paying for a CRM service or something like that. And so we go in and we, that is part of the P&L, but we help operate that business completely independently from CSE. It's part of our family of venues, of course, but it's its own venue. And so that's kind of where we're at. And that is once you take into account utilities, the mortgage or loan payment, as well as all the expenses that go into upkeep of the property, and then our fees as well.
So are there any wastes that you see people consistently kind of just spending money on things that they don't necessarily need to spend money on? Are there some commonalities there that you see happening?
Yes. Just because you think, just because you as the venue owner think that it's a good idea doesn't mean it's a good idea. Like I wish I could tell that to each one of my venue owners. But you don't want to be rude, but also like just because you have it in your mind that you want to do, I don't want to be too specific here. Just because you want to like put a new pergola in the back of your venue, or you want to create a new, backdrop for something, or you want to add wine barrels, or you want to, whatever you want to do, whatever's in your mind to do, because you think it's a good idea or because you have a vision for it, doesn't mean that it's a good idea. It's way better, or it doesn't mean that it's going to increase your revenue. And I think this is key. People have it in their minds, I think, especially on the venue ownership side, you're like, hey, I'm going to put in $1 million, or I'm going to spend $500,000 on a brand new parking lot. It's going to be stunning. It's going to be striped. It's going to be, it's going to be beautiful. People are going to love it. Therefore, since I spent that $500,000, I'm going to now charge $2,000 or $3,000 more dollars on my venue fee because of all of this money that I put in. There is a perceived value that is very different from the actual value. And the client coming in at your rustic venue could not give a crap about your fancy striped parking lot that you put $500,000 in. They're going to literally walk right off that parking lot, go look at the venue, and criticize the heck out of it because the paint's not done, or because there's no covered back patio, or whatever. So that, I think, is really, really, really key. And the way to overcome it is to start with an MVP. Start with some minimum viable product. If and speaking in general terms, not to kind of focus on urban or rural or a suburban style venue, but if you have a venue, you need a place for people to get married, the ceremony. You need to have a place for them to do a cocktail hour. You need to have a place for them to do a reception. Those three things. Start marketing. Start having people come in the space. You could price yourself a little bit lower even, and then start asking people, hey, what would you like? Or watch when they bring in their own designs. They're going to bring in draping. And if you find that like most of your couples are bringing in draping, it might be a good idea to add draping. So those sorts of things will kind of allow you to waterfall yourself into spending money instead of just spending $1 million up front and hoping that it's going to give you a return.
So have some evidence of a return before you pull the trigger and make a sizable investment.
100%, 100%. And don't just make a sizable investment based off of your own passions, unless you truly are okay making that investment and no one caring about it except you.
Yeah. If the wine barrels are going to make you that happy, maybe just go ahead and use them.
Wine barrels everywhere. Yep.
Yeah. So digging a little bit deeper on that, how do you recommend balancing investing in the marketing versus investing in the actual business itself? Like, is there a time, or is there a way that you can, figure out what's needed at a certain time? And can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. This is a great question. I'm so glad you brought it up. When looking at the business as a whole, and the venue business specifically, there's a physical side, an undeniable physical side, right? There's a personnel side of this business, and then there's the digital side. And the digital side is more important than ever. And, to call it marketing is, I think, fair, but it's more of just like your digital presence online. Like, what does your digital space look like, not just your physical space? And investing money, just like you'd invest in bathrooms, just like you'd invest in a patio or an indoor reception space or sinks or baseboards, just like that, you've got to spend money on marketing. You have to spend money on a website. You have to spend money on the digital elements that create that representation of your space online. So I would just say, when you're doing your budgeting, when you're thinking about building your venue and you're building your venue space, don't just think about the physical costs, the labor, the cement, the wood, the electricity. And people are okay with that. People are comfortable. Electrician, they're going to lay wires, they're going to put flooring. Okay, you'll put the cost together, and people are okay with that. But then when it comes to spending $12,000 a year on marketing or $30,000 a year on marketing, they're like, no, that's so expensive. It's like, do you want to just leave your baseboards off, or do you just want to, we don't need bathrooms, they can go somewhere else? No, you'd never do that. So marketing, your website, your social media presence, your plan around social media, your plan around paid marketing. Do you want to use paid platforms like Zola, Wedding Wire, The Knot, Here Comes the Guide? Do you want to use those? Do you want to do it in an organic way? All of that is really important, but just making sure that you have the budget for the digital space, not just the physical space.
I feel like that is very, very common because I've noticed a lot of venue owners will pour a ton of money into renovations and decor, but they'll kind of forget about the marketing. So people won't exactly know that they exist. So I think finding that balance is super, super important.
Yeah, 100%. And just one piece about that, that's probably one of the bits of feedback that I get most when we look at venues across the board, even our venues, which is crazy because we have a marketing team, but people will come up and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know you're here. Oh my gosh, I've lived in the area for 10 years or 20 years. I had no idea you guys were up here." And it's like what? That's crazy because we know, but they don't know. And so that means that we've not done an appropriate job of getting our name out there. I think a lot of people struggle.
Yeah, I feel like people just kind of, in general, overestimate their reach and their visibility. I feel like there's kind of a notion where you'll think that you just build a website, you have a social media page, you do a couple of posts, you write a couple of blogs, and you'll just be flooded with business. But I think you really have to make a conscious effort to really put a lot of time, money, and focus into that to generate an actual return on your venture.
Agreed, 100%. I want to just maybe wrap this with an analogy. This part specifically, if you've ever been to like Arizona or any place where it's a desert, for example, and you're driving along a road and you can't see anything for miles, maybe some canyons or mountains or whatever, and you're driving and there's a gas station coming up. You're going to see that gas station 3 to 5 miles away. That's kind of like a if you build it, they will come mentality. If you build a gas station and you're along a road, people are going to stop. They're going to get snacks. They're going to get gas. You built it. They're going to come, right? It's along a highway. You built the gas station. There's visibility. They can see you. Now, contrast that. If you've ever been to Tennessee, you're driving through the Smoky Mountains, or you're even here in Alabama, or any place with a lot of trees, North Carolina, whatever, and or a lot of hills. When you're driving along the road, you might be right next to a Costco, but there is a 70-foot tree, a line of trees right there, and on the other side of that trees are Costco, the gas stations, all this different stuff. And if you don't pull your phone open and take a look and figure out where the gas stations are, you're going to have no idea unless you pull your phone open, unless you look at street signs. Even though that venue, that gas station, that Costco might be Sam's Club, whatever, might be 300 feet away, you have no idea because of that line of trees. That's where we are today. You have to break through the noise. Those street signs, that stuff on your phone is the only way to show people that you exist. And the landscape is more crowded than ever before. There's more competition than ever before. There's more choices. The consumer has choices now when it comes to venues. And if you don't honor that landscape, you will fail 100%.
Yeah, and to dig a little bit deeper on that, before we keep going, what would you say, like how many venues would you say couples are inquiring about and touring in 2025? Has that number just increased by a substantial margin, since a couple of years ago?
It's crazy. It increased and then it decreased. And why that is because people really want, and we've seen this as a trajectory, and we're working, day in and day out to meet those needs. But we're seeing the younger generation, and this is going to continue for sure. They're gathering information online, and if the information isn't online, they by default have to reach out. But we are moving into a place very much like the real estate industry, where if you're apartment or house shopping and you don't see a price, you're going to go start looking at other things. And what you're going to do is you are going to get a price, and then you're going to go see that place. But if you go, are going apartment shopping and there's not even a range, you have no idea. It could be $10,000 a month, or it could be $1,500 a month. You're just not going to check out that place because you don't know if you can afford it. And so people are kind of in that space. So having a range on the website, having some sort of way that people can see this is how much this costs, is going to be really important. And so to kind of bring it back to your question, they used to need to reach out all the time to like gather that information. They were reaching out to like 10, 15, 20 venues. They were creating separate Gmails, John and Jane Smith, forever, whatever, at gmail.com. They would create this whole organization there. They would inquire at a bunch of venues. The Not in Wedding Wire will shoot your stuff out to a bunch of wedding venues. And you get all this, noise that comes through. You go to a wedding show and people like hit you up because they sell those lists. All that happened. So they were inquiring a lot. There was a lot of activity. We're moving into a place now where people are just going to do research quietly. They're not going to reach out as much. They're going to do research. They're going to go on your website. They're going to go on your social media. They're going to look at Pinterest. They're going to look at Reddit. They're going to ask ChatGPT, give me XYZ venues in this area.
Yep.
And if you're not showing up on that list, they're going to inquire on a fraction of that list that they come up with. And then those people, but they may have looked, they will look at 30 or 40 or 50, but they won't inquire. They're going to inquire at 10, and then they're going to go 2 or 5 or 3.
So how do you stand out in that noise?
Again, going back to that like digital infrastructure, you have to have digital infrastructure. Obviously, that's not everything. There are like best kept secrets still. But looking across the board. Now, this question gets nuanced because depending on the type of venue you are, like, let's go something wild here. Like, you are a exotic animal shelter in Texas, or you're an exotic animal shelter in Alabama. Actually, there's one here. People know you locally. It's like kind of like, it's called, I have a hat somewhere here. But they have all sorts of crazy animals and all sorts of different stuff. If that's something that's unique to them, showcasing that uniqueness in the way that works best. Like, you're not going to necessarily write blog posts, but maybe creating a reel about like Larry the yak that you have or whatever, like kind of creating that content specific to your place and your area is going to be key. So yeah, digital infrastructure, kind of using the marketing platform that doubles down on your strength is really important. And then also making sure, AI is pulling from not just blogs. It's pulling from social media. It's pulling from blogs. It's pulling from the Not in Wedding Wire. It's pulling from all of the different places. And so it is 100% worth it in 2025, 26, 27 to make sure that wherever you're showing up on socials, the information's the same. You have synergy across your brand, your icon's the same, your logo's the same. It doesn't say $3,000 for a Friday on one site and then 5,000 over here. Like that, making sure that you have consistent information across platforms and that you are on all the platforms is going to help you break through the noise where most venues are not doing that.
So are there any specific marketing platforms that you would recommend every single venue is a part of or is running ads on?
All the free ones. So I would start with the free ones, and then I would build from there. So here's what I would do. I would start with the free spaces that you can get attention from. So that's Instagram, that's Facebook, nothing paid yet. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even if you have a corporate base of business, Pinterest, Reddit, being in the conversations. You can't market yourself in Reddit per se, but going in Reddit and commenting and like being aware of the conversations that are happening there. I think Reddit, the reason I'm mentioning is it's a powerful way for like real connection, whereas everything's AI. So there's a shift to authenticity and like, let's have a conversation with another human and they're going to tell me the real thing kind of idea. But I would start with all the free stuff, even any platforms that allow you to create a free profile. I think Zola will allow you to do that. Here Comes the Guide is paid. Party Slate's paid. Event Tective might. Do the research. It's going to be different in your area, but do the research on platforms. Get yourself a free platform. Once you have a free platform, figure out an effective way to track the leads that you're getting from that platform. So that's step number one, because before you start putting money behind something, there's the old adage, like, we're spending all this money on marketing. 50% of our money has a return, 50% doesn't. We just don't know which is which. So coming up with a way to track. So maybe that's a separate landing page for Instagram and it's in your link in bio, it's in your, link tree or whatever. Separate landing page, separate way to track through a phone number, a different phone number that allows you to track, whatever the case may be, but find a way to track it. And then start with the most cost-effective options. And just right now, today, mid 2025, Zola is a huge and emerging opportunity, I think, for people. It's cost-effective. Here comes the guide. Fantastic. This is going to change. So don't come at me in, 2 years and say, here comes the guide's terrible. But I'm just saying right now, and do your own research. Go out there and look, but have that way of tracking the leads that you're getting, because you're going to want to have that in place before you start putting money behind it. And then as you start putting money behind it, track the actual leads you're getting to the money you're spending. And then more importantly, the leads you're spending and the bookings you're getting, because a platform can deliver tons of leads, but if it doesn't translate to actual bookings, you might need to reallocate your marketing dollars.
So how do paid ads and SEO and TikTok ads, Google ads, Meta ads, and all that, how do those platforms integrate into your strategy for the venues that you're working with?
TikTok, we're on TikTok in a paid way on, I think, almost all of our venues. Yeah, we're also running Meta campaigns and Google campaigns. It depends on the venue. We do different things. Each venue is different. Each venue is like a different child. They're better at different sports, and I've got 6 kids, so kind of look at it like that. But how we look at it, and how I would encourage others to look at it as well, is kind of like a tool bag. Open the tool bag, and if it's a screwdriver, do we need a flathead? Do we need a Phillips head? What material? Is it metal or is it wood? Whatever analogy you need. Is it a car? Are we drive a race car? Are we taking the kids to school and we need a minivan? Figure out the tool that you need to get the job done. So for us, we're using all of those, but then we quickly figure out which ones are overperforming, which ones are underperforming, which ones are performing on expectation, and then we cut and reallocate the budget of whatever the lowest kind of quarter is, 25%, and we reallocate that budget to whatever's working. And then occasionally we restart. So Meta, we were really struggling with at one venue. We completely stopped the ads. We were spending about $750 a month on Meta ads. We put that into Google. And I don't know if this is relevant for anyone, but we try to keep our cost per lead to under $30 a lead. So if we can't show that we're getting the lead for under $30 a lead, then some of our other financial calculations break down. So that's just a benchmark for us.
Yeah, and that's what we recommend for all of our clients as well. I think back to the analogy of driving down that desert road or driving through the Smoky Mountains. I think having that content ecosystem of TikTok ads, Meta ads, Google ads, but then also SEO on top of that is really just going to help your overall visibility, so people will actually know you exist and just make it easy to inquire at your venue. So I think all of that is super, super important.
100%.
So what type of follow-up marketing are your venue clients doing are you doing any follow-up marketing for your existing client base, any reactivation campaigns, email marketing, referral opportunities?
Yes, all of them. So we have between 30 and 50 touch points with our clients when they inquire. Some of them are automated, some of them are personal, meaning just kind of manual. And what we want to do, our goal overall is to be able to qualify the lead, as soon as possible. We don't want it doesn't serve, and we think about it in terms of service. So it doesn't serve someone, if they don't want to hear from us, it doesn't serve someone to be blowing them up. So we do want to qualify them, but at the same time, we don't want to try to qualify someone, hit them up a couple of times, maybe send them a text, send them an email, call them, and they're busy. They've got a job. Maybe they're a night nurse, or maybe they're, in the military, and they're busy. We're all busy, right? And then you add wedding planning on top of this. It's like, oh my gosh. So just having empathy to what the client's going through and realizing that we need to stay top of mind to them until they tell us we don't want to hear from you anymore. or we chose something else. And we really want to come at it with a consultative approach. So it's like, hey, in this industry, we're not trying to sell them something that they don't want. Like, they reached out. So that tells us that they are engaged, they're thinking about getting engaged, or they have an event, or they're thinking about having an event. And so we know that there's a need there. And so it's on us. We think it's, a way that we can serve them by following up consistently until they let us know, hey, we're done, we're not having this event, or we booked something else, or we're going in a different direction. But we're going to use every means necessary to follow up with them. And we're going to really try to do it until they tell us to stop.
Right. Makes sense. So what would be your number one piece of advice, or maybe two or three pieces of advice, to a newer venue owner or someone who wants to get into the industry?
These questions are tough because, it's a lot.
Problem. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's interesting because, my friend, Kristen Benford, she's a fantastic coach in the industry. She says it's 100-layer cake. And it is really true. It's hard to pull out like one or two specific things, but
Yeah.
I would say overall, if you don't have experience in the industry at all, try to get some experience in the industry before you spend a bunch of money. And you can get experience by proxy, by hiring people who have experience. You can get experience so many different ways. You can go work for free at a venue. You can join WEVA. You can listen to the Venue RX. You can listen to this podcast here. Like, there's so many different things you can do, but start getting that experience. Once you get that experience, really doing a thoughtful job of understanding your area and what product you hope to bring to market, and then understanding yourself and like, what do you bring to market? What do you bring to your team? What do you bring to the venue? Why are you in this industry? Are you going to buy the venue, build the venue, and hang on to it for a long time because you want the job of a wedding planner and a wedding executor? Or are you doing this to build an enterprise and then sell it? So kind of coming down with those very specific, goals, I guess, that you have in your mind are really important. And then cross-referencing that with what your area needs, and then, building that. And I would also say just be thoughtful about it. Realize it's going to take longer. It's going to cost more. This is one of the most difficult parts of this industry. And so just be prepared to be patient, deal with permitting. Permitting will take you longer than you think. The building process or buying process will take you longer than you think, or rehabbing. And so being prepared for all of those things, and I'm not saying that in a discouraging way at all. I know everyone probably knows that it will be more difficult, but just having that expectation when you go into it means when you get hit with the adversity, we expected adversity. This is what adversity looks like. It's okay. We move forward. So yeah, I could go on, but I think those kind of just top of mind are the things that I would say.
So are there any commonalities between the top performing venues that you work with? Like, what do you think sets a top performing venue apart from the rest?
Top performing venues, they're tracking their data. They're delivering incredible experiences for their couples. Top performing venues also are making enough money so they can reinvest into their business, and they're reinvesting both digitally and physically. So again, they're guided by what the clients are saying. They're listening to feedback, so they're actively taking feedback and not just looking for 5-star reviews. That's kind of something I think that people are really focused on, and it certainly is super important, extremely important. But it's not just about the 5-star review, but it's about understanding from the client's perspective what they were missing, what they're looking for. And if you're able to have enough financial margin where you have a buffer and you're reinvesting some of that money into the business, maybe people do want a parking lot. To go back on what I was saying before, like maybe people do need that parking lot. You've just had a grass field that people have been parking on. They want a parking lot, or they want gravel, reinvesting back into that. So they're listening to their clients. They're creating amazing hospitality experiences. At the end of the day, these events that we're all throwing are once in a lifetime events. A baby shower, it's a birth. A celebration of life is a death. A marriage hopefully is a once in a lifetime experience. We're celebrating these things. We're helping people. We're facilitating the celebration. And so anything that is distracting from that and distracting from people having those interpersonal connections is a problem to be solved, you know? And so I think the best venues that I've seen are actively solving those, and they've got team members that really care about that mission, and they are consistently working towards that goal.
That's awesome. So lastly, to wrap this up, can you tell us a little bit more about Common Sense Events, who your ideal clientele is, and how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. Common Sense Events, WEVA, and VenueRx, or other way, is like VenueRx is the easiest, freest thing to listen to, check out. Podcast, YouTube platform, and then WEVA is a membership association specifically for the venue industry. It is that is paid, so it's a paid membership to get in. It's anywhere from $300 to $500 annually. There's tons of resources inside there. There's educational sessions on how to create bar programs, and I mean, like, there's everything, pro formas. There's a bunch of stuff in there, and then there's also events. We're going to start doing some live events and things like that coming up, which is really exciting. And so that's WEVA, and then Common Sense Events is a professional management company for the wedding and events industry. So if you own a venue, you operate a venue, or you're an investor and you're looking for someone to help professionally run your venue because you don't want to run it, you just want to own the building, you just want to own the real estate, we're a great solution for that. So we also, I would say, something that's differentiates us from other management companies in the US, because there are a few, and they do a great job. But one of the things that is a key differentiator for us is we're collaborative. Other companies will kind of say, hey, you know, we're going to put a lease on this building, and they really expect the owner to just totally disappear, go away, don't talk to us, don't do anything. We're going to run our playbook here at this venue, and we are really collaborative. So again, we're going to look in that tool chest that I've been, referencing, and say, what's going to work for your venue? And a lot of times, venue owners' goals are different. Some of them, it's a legacy play. For some people, it's a real estate play. For some people, you want to buy and hold it and then sell it eventually with a professional management company in place. So we do have solutions for that. We handle all of your hiring. Well, I'll start from the top. We handle all of your marketing, all of your lead generation. So you don't have to worry about lead generation, all of those like lead systems that you get marketed to. You don't have to worry about any of that. We take care of all that. So leads, all of your marketing, your lead management. We do all of your sales. We'll hire all of your team members. We'll train all your team members. We will execute all the weddings, all of the setup and tear down, chairs, tables, all that stuff, and then follow up at the end of the event, getting that 5-star review. We do that under your brand. We've also created a few brands before for people in collaboration with them. So it's very hands-on, very in the trenches, in the weeds. And we have almost 80 employees now across the country that we do that. Currently, we're in Connecticut, San Diego, so California, Mississippi, North Carolina, Alabama, and then we've done consulting in Tennessee and Texas. And yeah, we're growing, and we'd love to have a chat with you. Also, if you've owned a venue for a long time, and maybe just that season of life is changing for you, and you're ready to be done with it, whether that's having more kids, or maybe you're getting a bit older and don't like the manual aspect of this business, we'd love to chat with you as well and see if we'd be a good fit.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us.